Go. Welcome everyone that's that's joining. We're getting started a minute or two late because we were firing away already and having a good conversation. So excited for everyone to join us. If this is your first session joining us, this is we've been doing a few of these sessions at European friendly times, and this is the first Europe session that we're doing in June 2020. Glad everyone could join us. I'm Mark Stoddard. I run sales and marketing here at ClientSuccess. So I've kind of been here, manning all these, and excited to have Dave Blake, our CEO, and of course our guest of honor today, Matt Myszkowski from SAP. Dave, Mike, gents, how's it going? I just said Mike instead of Matt.
It's not the first time I've heard that. If anybody's watched Monster Inc., you'll understand why it's Mike Myszkowski. So
yeah, I get Mike quite a bit too. I was looking at my next slide, and there's a Mike on that, and that's what triggered it. But anyway,
whoever I am, I'm glad to be here. Whoever
it is, wherever you are, remind everyone where you're calling in from, Matt.
So I'm based in the UK. There's a city called Milton Keynes. Some of you will be familiar with it, less so others, I guess. We're just north of London by about 70 kilometres.
Of course.
Big fact, it's the only and first purpose-built city in the UK. So you can take that away for free.
Used to live right near there, Matt, for a period of time. Yeah.
And you decided to leave us.
Nice.
That's great.
Well, really good. So glad we could have this session today. A really important topic, something that I don't think we probably would have been talking about a number of years ago. And, with everything going on in the world today, it's something that luckily is getting more of a highlight, and we're having more discussions around it, and glad to get Matt's take on it. I personally, I've seen a lot of discussions around mental health just in general. I've seen some discussions around mental health kind of in the tech community. I've never actually had anyone I haven't seen anyone talking about it kind of in the context of customer success and how it impacts us and our teams. And so really excited to have Matt chat through that. And before we do that, though, I got a couple other things we wanted to share. I think, Dave, you wanted to share a couple things. Maybe you share a couple things, and then I'll chat through a couple things, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for everybody for joining us. We know that this is a busy time, crazy time. We know you're out there doing your thing, and we just are grateful that you would carve out a few minutes of your time to join us at ClientSuccess and Matt here. I'll say one thing, and we've done many of these webinars for the last 2 or 3 months. We've done them every Tuesday and Thursday. We've done them for several years. I'm honored to be at this one. Matt, I have great respect for. We've tried to meet in person and just have missed connecting in London and elsewhere. But really grateful that he would come on and share his story. And I think out of all the content we've done, this may be the single most important piece of content that we are helping to deliver to the community today. So Matt, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for making this conversation one that is relevant and important and the right conversation to have for all of us. And so thank you for joining us. Thanks for everybody else for being here today. And I'm excited to watch.
Yeah, and just especially if everybody could, in the idea of making sure that this topic, this content gets shared and talked about, feel free to share takeaways, post kind of quotes that you get from our discussion today, post them on Twitter, post them on LinkedIn. Love to continue that discussion there. Before we jump into things with Matt, though, what I'm going to do, I'll just share a couple things. So those of you who have been on these sessions, you'll know that, as Dave said, we're doing them every Tuesday, Thursday. We've got a really fun lineup of really experienced, thoughtful customer success thought leaders, operators, consultants, investors. So kind of everybody, a lot of people just kind of across the customer success sphere. And so obviously, since you're on the session, you're registered, but make sure that, you've got the calendar invites set up. I'm sending emails out to everybody a couple times a week. So if you're not receiving those, let me know. Or, my ask is if there's somebody else on your team, a colleague, a friend that you think could be interested in this, please share it out there, get other people. There's a bunch of people that have just been posting about the webinar series on LinkedIn, on Twitter. Really cool to see those. Really appreciate you doing that. If this is your first time on one of these, you're not familiar with ClientSuccess, who we are, what we do, I'll give you a quick little intro into our story and what we do. We're a customer success growth platform. And so really our mission is to help with all things related to customer success. We're going to give things like your CSM team all the tools and capabilities, the training, the best practices that they need to drive customer success across the entire life cycle of a customer's journey, from onboarding to adoption to growth to renewal, all things in between. And also at the same time, giving really insightful reports and analytics to executives and leaders. And we've also even recently released a bunch of really cool collaborative features that allow CSMs to share what's going on with customers through their organization, drive a bunch of really good collaboration, and all with the idea of driving a culture of customer success. So if you'd like to hear a little bit more, we're easy to find. You find us, we're at ClientSuccess.com, request a demo, reach out to us, shoot me a note. I'm directly at Mark@ClientSuccess. Get us on Twitter @ClientSuccess. One other thing I'll share with us is, if you saw a couple weeks ago, we actually received the 2020 Cody Award for the best customer success solution on the market. We were really excited about this. Everybody on the market always competes for it, and we were really excited to be awarded with the best customer success solution on the market right now. So again, if you'd like to hear from us, you'd like to see what we've been up to, please reach out to us, find us. And with all that being said, let's jump into things with Matt. I'm gonna go ahead and pause my screen and turn it over to you, Matt, and let you show your screen. And while he's pulling that up, just so everybody knows, I think, Matt, you said you've probably got about, let's say, 25-ish minutes of kind of slides or content that you want to share. So what we'll do is I will kind of man the chat panel or the Q&A. And so as questions come in, we'll save most of the questions until kind of shortly after. And then as soon as we get to more of the Q&A section, we'll go through all those questions. And, if you'd like to just send your question in via the chat panel or the Q&A, great, do that. And I'll kind of read those off and talk through those. If you would like to, actually be unmuted and have a conversation, I'm happy to do that also. Just click the raise hand button. You should all have a raise hand button at the bottom of the Zoom link or the Zoom panel there. And so we're really just looking forward to hearing what Matt has to say and then having a really good dialogue about it. Cool.
Excellent. Mark, you should be able to see my screen.
See your screen, see your face, hear you.
Fantastic. Good. Let's go. Excellent. Dave, Mark, thank you both for extending the invitation for me to come and talk to you today. So welcome everyone to today's call and presentation, where I take a look at why in the customer success industry you are, in my mind, more susceptible to mental health issues than what I believe the majority of other roles that exist today. So I will start with a quick introduction before we get into the agenda. So my name is Matt Myszkowski, not Mike, Matt Myszkowski. I've been in customer success roles now for probably around 15 years, and generally around SaaS for probably maybe 20 odd years. For the last 8-9 years, I guess, I have held a variety of CS leadership roles, most recently to where I am today based at SAP. I'm currently the VP of Customer Success for EMEA. I have somewhere in the region of 70 odd CSMs that report into me. I have 5 regional directors that are responsible for the 5 regions that make up EMEA. At SAP, customer success is actually a paid engagement. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. I know it's something that's quite sensitive to a lot of people, but it's under a holistic packaged offering that we call Preferred Success. But for today, that's probably enough about me.
Have a discussion around that for sure. I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So that's enough about me, I guess, for today in terms of probably my career and customer success relating to me. Let's look at someone who knows 1 or 2 things about mental health challenges, and that is me. So why me? Now, let me start by telling you why I believe I'm standing in front of you today, and to be in a suitable place to talk to you about what I believe is a critical topic. Firstly, I've been a CSM. Secondly, I have been and am now still a customer success leader, leading teams of CSMs. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, I don't mind admitting, and I'll be very transparent and very candid with you today, I have had and continue to have my own struggles and battles with mental health. And I'll touch a little bit on what that actually means and looks like for me. Back on the 13th of March 2019, I took the plunge and wrote an article on LinkedIn. Now, for those of you that follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you're probably saying, well, nothing major there, especially when I have been known to write the odd blog post or two, probably share a comment here or there. But something was different this time. During the weeks leading up to me writing that article, I was becoming hugely inspired by some of the leaders around the globe that I look up to, both in and outside of the CS industry, all talking around the need and benefits of exposing their vulnerabilities. So with all that inspiration inside of me, I shared a very emotional and personal blog post detailing the struggles that I'd faced with my own vulnerabilities, and namely that was mental health. I struggle with what most people label probably as depression. Now, I don't label it as such, I don't give it a name, just because the way that I've interpreted it and processed it, I see it just as a feeling of varying degrees of strength that I just have to manage, and I choose to manage that on a daily basis. Sometimes that feeling doesn't go full blown into a deep depression. It does at times. Sometimes it is just maybe a mild anxiety, and sometimes it just may be one of those days where I just don't want to be happy and uplifting and energetic. And those are things that I would associate with myself generally. Later in 2019, I have my own podcast. Definitely don't appear on it as much as I would like, but I have my own podcast called Customer Success Matters Live. And we explored this topic of mental health in customer success specifically with two guests. One of them is a CS leader in the UK called Chris Mitchell. I know Chris was meant to be joining the call today. I'm not sure he is in the audience or not, but Chris was one of the guests then. And the second guest was a wellbeing and resilience consultant called Amit Oberoi. And we had a great conversation, really great dialogue. The feedback, though, from both my blog post and that podcast was amazing. The volume of people who contacted me, both within CS roles and outside of the CS space, from individual contributors and leaders, from friends, people that know me, colleagues that have worked with me and do work with me, to just random strangers, was crazy. And as I said, I've written a number of blog posts, I've done a fair few podcasts. I probably total up the volume of responses on everything else I've done, and it's nowhere near the volume for this one kind of exercise. It was really during that time where I was digesting and processing all the feedback and the comments that it actually really hit me how at risk members of the specific customer success industry were to mental health related illnesses. So let's dig a little deeper into why that maybe is the case. Why are customer success managers or customer success professionals at risk generally, or potentially even more so at risk than other roles that may exist in some of the companies that you work for today? Firstly, we need to understand and accept the world we currently live in. And that world has changed a lot in the last kind of 12 weeks for all of us. Probably even more so now as we experience the challenges of living and working in this COVID world. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the term VUCA. There's many different pronunciations of it. I'm going with what I believe it is. But it originated from, I believe, the United States Army War College, where it was created to describe conditions resulting from the Cold War. The VUCA concept has since been adopted throughout businesses and organizations across many, many industries, many sectors, many countries and regions to guide leadership and strategy planning. V, volatility, is the quality of being subject to frequent, rapid and significant change. U, the uncertainty, is a component of that situation in which events and outcomes are highly unpredictable. C is complexity. Complexity involves a multiplicity of issues and factors, some of which may be intricately, I can't speak now, intricately interconnected or not. You know the word I mean. And A is ambiguity and is manifested in a lack of clarity and the difficulty of understanding exactly what the situation is that any one individual may be in at any one time. All of this is challenging our personal value systems to the very core. In a world where the what takes a back seat to the why and to the how, making decisions, not just for leaders, but all of us as individuals, requires many things. It requires courage, it requires awareness, and it requires an acceptance and a willingness to make mistakes. But all of this comes with a huge pressure and a weight of expectation if we're not careful, especially for customer success management professionals. Whether you work like me at a huge organization like SAP with hundreds of CSMs all over the globe, or you work at a small startup as potentially the only CSM, I'm sure there are probably two things that will remain very consistent. Firstly, as a CSM, we wear many hats. You wear many hats, and often that is throughout the same day. And sometimes you actually even have to wear multiple hats within the same meeting or same call. You go from wearing a sales hat to a project management hat, to a support hat, back to a consultant's hat, and the many other hats that are often needed as a CSM. Now, arguably, this is part of the attraction to the role for all of us, the variety that we all thrive off, the buzz that comes with being able to influence and impact so many areas of our customers' businesses, the ability to interact with so many stakeholders from your own company. All of these no doubtedly contributing to your love of the CS profession. Secondly, the very nature of the role is one that inherently aims to please. Choosing to be a customer success manager or a customer success professional, you have that very personality within you who cannot help but want to help others, who wants to assist others, that wants to support, that wants to enable success for all. And ultimately, you and we and me can struggle to say no in the pursuit of that willingness to help. Now you put those two together and it becomes very clear, for me at least, how easy it becomes for customer success professionals to be buried under that weight of expectation of the needs and demands of both your customers, your colleagues, the business that you work for, and that is even before maybe the pressure that you actually put on yourself. We've touched a little bit on the why, both from an holistic view of today's world and the one that we're working in. We've also looked a little bit of maybe some of the demands that are placed on us as CSM professionals. Relatively easy kind of understanding that, I think. We're going to get to the hard bit now, and that's ultimately what we and you ultimately can do about it. Excuse me. At SAP, as you would expect from a large organization that places so much importance on well-being generally, we have a number of initiatives and support ecosystems in place, generally around well-being and health, but specifically also around mental health. And on this slide, we can explore some of the areas you as individuals should be aware of and can make small changes around to cope better with the pressures of mental health. Firstly, know and understand your triggers. So triggers are the external factors or factors that you may not be able to control that throw you off balance, even when you've probably been taking good care of yourself in every way possible that you can think about. Developing action plans to use when triggers occur can help you get back on track before things get worse. Identifying each trigger as it happens or before it happens and responding with an action plan is a powerful, powerful skill to enhance the quality of your life. So an example of a trigger for me, and I said that I'd get quite personal about this, a trigger for me is not getting sufficient time to exercise. So I know that if I go 2-3 days without exercise, the anxiety and the frustration builds up on me. So for me, that is something that I carve out in my week to make sure that I get sufficient time to do that. And I'll touch a little bit more on this as we go through the presentation. Secondly, once you get to know your triggers, you can then put a plan in place to change the things that you're in control of and eliminate the things that you can't control. Take ownership of the need to change. Start small. It may be that you just give yourself 10 minutes a day to mindfulness. I know there's companies out there that place huge degree of importance on that. It's not, for me, it's not something that I engage in, but it's a small step and it might be relevant and it might be something that you can apply. It may be that you choose to go to bed 30 minutes earlier every day. I think all of us probably at times think that we're not getting enough sleep. Take accountability and responsibility for that. Or it may be that you choose to give up one of your social media platforms. All of these things may be one or more of the triggers you face. So an example for me was actually that I eliminated one of my social media platforms, and that was about 2.5, 3 years ago now. And I came off Facebook. I will be honest, I have come back on in the last couple of months, but I chose to leave Facebook. I felt there was too much content on there for me that was adding to my frustration with what was going on in the world, the environment. It raised feelings of anger and frustration, and it generally led me into a place of negativity. That for me wasn't good for my mental health, my well-being, and I made the choice to leave it. Thirdly, balance. Now, I don't mean this in relation to just a work-life balance. In our lives, we have all kinds of priorities, obligations, relationships, interests, and activities that are all competing aggressively for our time. We have things that we really must do, like going to work, taking our children to school, caring for others, paying our bills. And we also have things that we enjoy and make us happy, like spending time with family, spending time with friends, working on a hobby, playing on a sports team. Balance is how we do the things we have to do together with the things we want to do without changing the number of hours in the day. Next is exercise. When I was looking through the SAP brand image library for an image to demonstrate exercise, I really didn't want to choose something that came across as high energy, because exercise for you is very individual. It may just be going for a walk, whether that's with a partner, whether that's with your family, whether it's with your dog, whether it's alone. And as much as I exercise relatively frequently in a number of different ways, one of my biggest and most important forms of exercise is what I try to do twice daily, a walk. I plan that around my work, or actually if I'm lucky, I combine it with work. So if I need to be on a call but a camera's not needed, then I do something that I call a walk and talk call. I go out for a walk and I talk. So I combine the exercise with my work. I also have certain meetings with certain colleagues where we've got an agreement that we will both go out and walk while we have a meeting. An example of this is that I have a one-to-one with one of my regional directors. We accept that actually we can't take notes maybe. We accept that it won't always be on camera. Sometimes we put our phone cameras on and we do the meeting. But we've decided to make that decision to go and combine our one-to-ones with some exercise, and we get out in the fresh air, a more relaxed environment, and that's how we choose to get some exercise every day. The fifth area here is planning, and I guess that's bringing together maybe 3 or 4 of the components that I've spoken about already. One of the biggest contributors for me to stress and depression is when you feel like you're losing control. For me, the loss of control comes from the lack of a coherent plan and time running away with you. So my planning covers everything from my time during the week and at work, to planning what to eat, to what type of exercise, how will I manage my weekends with friends and family. So for me, while this is quite controlling, it is actually, for me, in my simplistic view, just controlling the controllables, mitigate the risk of those triggers that I spoke about earlier creeping up on you and negatively impacting you. And finally, it's part of probably what we're doing today, is talking. So what should be the easiest is arguably the hardest one to do. I know that from personal experience. Even to this day, I'm probably still finding it easier talking in this environment to a number of strangers. And yes, there may be some friends or colleagues that are on the call, but I find it easier in this environment talking to many people rather than maybe talking to people that are probably most closest to me, either family members or close friends. However, the biggest change in my life in terms of managing my mental health and my well-being was when I opened up and was willing to talk about it. Talking to people will mean different things to different people. You may choose to go to formal counselling. You may choose to engage with understanding friends or partners. You may choose to utilise anonymous social media channels that exist for specialist type of support. You will find out what works for you and your circumstances, but guaranteed the best and first step you should take is talking about it. So that's enough about the individual, what you can do for yourselves. But what if you're like me and you're also a leader? And I guess when we're talking about leaders, I don't necessarily mean you have to be a leader in terms of job title. You can be a leader just as an individual that is there in your company that wants to take a lead in this. As a leader, there is lots of things you can do to help and support those that suffer, while also educating and driving awareness for those that may not suffer or may not be currently suffering. And it starts quite simply with the destigmatization of mental health. And there are lots of different things we can do to tackle stigma around mental health. The first and most important thing is to start talking openly about mental health and the problems that come with it. So for me, for Dave and Mark to invite me on and let me talk about this is a hugely powerful and exciting development in this. There are a few quick ways that you as a leader can drive a more empathetic work environment. And we'll talk through a few of these now. So number one, be aware of the words we use and in what situation. A lot of these are throwaway comments that I think previously, me, myself personally, hasn't really given much thought to. So things like, oh, Mr. OCD is at it again, organising everything, or someone saying, oh, she's totally schizo today. We've heard comments like these. We've maybe used those ourselves. But through the ears of a colleague who maybe has a mental health challenge, they can sound like indictments. They can sound like accusations and criticisms. Secondly, respect sick days for mental health issues. Recognition that it is an illness like others that may need time off to treat and recover from it. If someone was ill from a physical illness, you wouldn't tell them to just pull through it or encourage them by saying, you'll feel better soon, just get on with it. So why should we be using that when we refer to mental health? Thirdly, be proactive. Offer employees access to information and resources. In a recent Harvard Business Review survey that I read a couple of weeks ago on employee burnout, nearly 70% of respondents said that their employees were not doing enough to prevent or alleviate burnout. Managers, leaders, bosses like myself need to do a better job of helping their employees connect to the resources before stress actually leads to a more serious mental health problem. Fourth, train people to respond to mental health issues. SAP, like other companies I know, have a team of mental health first aiders. This is a fairly new program. It's a national program proven to increase people's ability to recognize the signs of someone who may be struggling with mental health challenges and connect them to good support resources. Through role plays and other activities, they offer guidance in how to listen in a non-judgmental way, offer reassurance, and assess the risk of suicide or self-harm when a colleague is suffering maybe a panic attack or reacting to a traumatic event. So these are four initially relatively simple things you can do as a leader or as an individual to help destigmatize mental health in the workplace. But there's more. Read the signs and react. Being aware and able to spot the symptoms of employees who could potentially be suffering from mental health issues is a valuable ability to have. And these may be physical, psychological, or behavioral signs. And there will be a lot of them. I'm going to call out a few of them. Physical, maybe just someone having, maybe someone having a panic attack. Psychological, maybe someone that is feeling confused, comes across as distracted, detached from their job. And behavioral, maybe someone showing increased bouts of anger or increased absence. Now, as I said, this is nowhere near an exhaustive list, and I encourage you to look further into some of the additional signs that you as a leader could be aware of. There are lots of resources available online now. And on that, resources on mental health in the workplace are more readily available than ever before, wherever you are in the world and whatever language you need that content to be in. The company you work for may have a toolkit, but even if they don't, I highly encourage you to go away today and Google toolkit, mental health, workplace. There are lots out there. Take advantage of these toolkits and utilize them to drive awareness, to inform, to educate, and to act. Probably the most important one as a leader, I've spoken a lot about this during the COVID outbreak. Be a role model. Be a role model. All of this requires leaders to role model self-care themselves. Getting enough sleep and quiet time, exercising, making space for recharging and rest, being with the people they care about shouldn't be seen as optional, but as an uncompromising necessity, and at the heart of what allows for great leadership and quality work to happen. So start with yourself and demonstrate the things that are important to all of us. As I said, this was something that's really relevant for me at the moment, and I've been talking to my team of CSMs about this. Like lots of companies, I'm sure you're seeing behaviours where a lot of your teams aren't choosing to take their annual leave. They're in lockdown, they can't go abroad and have their family holidays, so people are saving up their annual leave. The challenge with that is that you're becoming more and more under pressure. You're not breaking away from your work. So I've really encouraged a lot of my team to really kind of take annual leave. That is something that I wasn't doing myself. And I was giving out this advice and someone called me out on it last week. Matt, you haven't been off this year, have you? I was like, well, I've had a couple of days here and there. Start living the advice that you're giving out to people. And it starts with us as role models and leaders. As we wrap up today's talk, I thought long and hard about a quote or a phrase that I wanted to leave with you that was relevant and relative to mental health. And I actually chose this, which I think is something that actually is not just something that is specific to mental health and mental health issues, but it's something that I believe in hugely. And I really want it to kind of, I want you to take away this idea. Everyone you talk to, everyone you meet is potentially fighting a battle that you know nothing about. You see them face to face, but actually behind that face, behind the Zoom call, you genuinely don't have too much insight into what that battle is that individual is facing. So just be kind. And I think that's a really good place to kind of leave my presentation today. So at this stage, more than happy, as I said to Mark, more than happy to open up for questions. But I'd also be quite interested and would encourage people to maybe open up just for a dialogue between us around maybe some of the things I've presented today, maybe some of the challenges that you've seen, you've experienced, you've seen with teams that you manage, colleagues you work with, because in all of this, the most important thing for me is that actually we're trying to destigmatize mental health. So for me, it's about starting today. So Mark, that is it in terms of content and slides. Happy to open up from here.
Cool. Yeah, let's open it up to questions. And you kind of got two options in terms of questions. If you want to put questions in the chat pane, I'm happy to kind of read through those. I have a few questions myself that I kind of want to chat through.
Yeah.
And if you'd also, if you'd like to unmute and actually, chat directly with Matt, I'm happy to do that. If you could just raise your hand in the chat pane. If you're comfortable with that, you might not be comfortable with that. So what we'll do is, we'll go through if there are questions, great, we'll go through those. If no, I'll kind of ask my two questions and we'll go from there. On one of your I think two back on your slides, you talked about noticing the signs, and you talked about things like, noticing increased absence or noticing if someone's having, specific episodes or whatever it is. I'm curious your thoughts on, that there's one thing about noticing somebody's moods and trends when you're in the office together. What advice do you have when we're all remote and maybe I'm only on Zoom with you for, a couple meetings a day, and I don't necessarily get to kind of witness when you came into the office, when you left, those types of things. Like not that you're always managing. Just like what's your advice to leaders kind of in a remote work environment?
Do you know what? It's a really good question, and I will answer it because I think there is an answer. But I think one of the things that you and I and Dave were speaking about beforehand was the analogy that I used, and I did steal it from a close friend of mine around we're all in the same boat. And the example that I gave back to you and Dave was, I challenge that. We're not in the same boat. We're in the same storm. The storm that we have at the moment globally is consistent, but we are all in individual boats with very different circumstances. Yes, some may be worse than others, but actually they're different. They're just different boats. And my challenge is that I've got my job. My wife has got her job. We've got 2 young kids that are running around the house causing havoc, and we're trying to homeschool them. It isn't easy. But then I've also got someone in my team that has relocated from Brazil to Ireland just a few weeks before COVID's outbreak, is not close to family, hasn't yet built his network up, his network of friends. His situation is pretty bad as well. So yes, we've got this storm that we're all sharing, but we're all in very individual boats, and that's kind of some of the messaging that I've spoken to my team about. I have been probably more visual and more verbal with my team than I've ever been, and that's been important. I think one of the things that we did at the very beginning as a leadership team for EMEA, me and my 5 regional directors, was making sure that we were quite relaxed about how our working days were going to pan out. So we were encouraging our colleagues to bring partners into the calls. We were encouraging them to bring kids into the calls. We were encouraging them to bring their pets into the call, because I didn't want later on in the process, 6 weeks down the line, for me to see kids in the background and people worry that I was going to think bad of them in that. So we've just been very open with our colleagues, encouraging them to share their world with us, and that's made it a lot more relaxed. There have been people that have struggled, and I think the fact that Zoom and Teams and Skype for Business and whatever your collaboration tools are, I do think having the camera on is helping to really understand where people are. I've had a number of calls with individuals where you can see they're struggling, and some people, look, I've had calls with team members over the last few weeks, more in the last 12 weeks than I have done in probably 10 years as a leader, where people have shed a lot of tears. It's hard. It has been very hard for people, and we have to accept that. And I just try to create an environment where people can feel comfortable to express those feelings, whether it's anger, whether it's frustration, whether it's hurt and pain, and just understanding that those boats are very different for all of us, even though we're in this storm. So yeah, hopefully it's hard. It's hard. You as a leader start to know and understand your team better than anyone, and you'll be able to see different behaviours that aren't associated with that individual. And then it's the time to really just have a conversation with them about how they're feeling. So yeah.
One thing I've noticed is, in a pre-COVID, we're all working from the office environment. A lot of that kind of just happens organically. You kind of just notice that stuff as you're in the office together, etc. But in a world, I found that I just need to be much more kind of deliberate about kind of crafting environments for that. So like, for instance, a couple things that we've done on my team is, we have, once or twice a week, a team lunch, and we take the team lunch from somewhere that's not your home desk or your home office, and we do that purposefully. Yeah. We try to bring partners and pets and kids and into that to just have a little bit more of a social dialogue. And the other thing that we've done is, pre-COVID, we oftentimes would have some version of a stand-up, maybe daily, maybe a couple times a week. And they were always very, almost like transactional. Like the best practice on the stand-up is always like, what have you done in the last 24 hours? What are you doing in the next 24 hours? What are your blockers? And they're meant to be 10, 15 minutes. Let's get together and talk business. And what I've found especially in today's environment, is letting those meetings drift a little bit longer and having a little bit more time for a social interaction, so that I've got the team together. This might be the only time I get the team together today or even this week. And, yes, talking business, and yes, talking about our goals and our metrics and our objectives, et cetera, but also just having a time to, connect, because in your example, you've got the colleague who moved country and moved continent, doesn't have a social network. And in a lot of cases, this might be their only social outlet. And so being mindful where, a lot of times us as leaders, we're very, task oriented, and we got to drive the objectives and move them forward. But, this is a time where I think it's important for us to take a step back and think through.
Yeah, we've done a couple of things, and some of those are great examples that we've done here at SAP. And I've largely left it down to each regional director to be creative. We've shared ideas, and other directors have swapped ideas. But yeah, those type of things, the kind of the virtual cocktail hours, and the book clubs we do. Every Thursday morning we do an EMEA-wide quiz, and the winner of that quiz gets a meal, usually a Domino's pizza, delivered to them for them and their family. And it's just little things like this that just break up the day, hopefully bring just a little bit of fun into people's lives while they're struggling through a pretty unique situation. Yes, there's lots of informal things. I actually did something quite formal as well, and I mentioned the podcast that I did 12 months or so ago, and the resilience consultant that participated was a gentleman called Amit Oberoi. Amit runs his own consulting company now called The Resilience Factor. And I've worked with Amit in the last 6 weeks or so to measure resilience. And I think resilience is a really important word in terms of what we're going through, because it is testing our resilience to the very core. And we did a survey to complement our employee engagement survey, where we measured the resilience of our team. And I think the results largely for the team, when they got the results back, was quite surprising.
Mm-hmm.
How people probably weren't as resilient as they thought they were. And look up resilience and what it means, and it will mean many different things to many different people, but understand what resilience is. Amit talks about it in terms of kind of 4 pillars and 4 elements that make it up, and that's how his tool works. But it was insightful for me as a leader. It was insightful for them as individuals to understand that actually during this time, that actually their resilience is really being tested to the core.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple comments and questions that I'll read off in the chat panel. Appreciate these comments, questions. If there's others out there, please bring them on. Thomas just mentions, taking time to understand where others really are, takes patience and listening skills. We all need more reminders like this. Thanks for that comment, Thomas. Roland has a question here. Basically he says, employee burnout and customer success is a major issue, as you mentioned earlier in the discussion, Matt. Mm-hmm. And he says, we're typically people who want to help, and that leads us to work whenever the customer needs and whenever our own organization wants us to, and to never say no. So I think you mentioned a lot. There's kind of like this impetus to always say yes and never say no. Mm-hmm. It goes on to say, not all companies are wise to the idea of looking after employees, but I'm sure there's a financial argument. And so his question is, are you aware of any detailed business case for investing in mental health from a cost benefit point of view? Is there any, have we gotten to that point to where people are actually like understanding the business case of it? Or, and if anybody else is aware, maybe Matt, if you're not aware, if anybody else is aware, I'd love to kind of see that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Roland. If it's the Roland, I think it is. Good to hear from you. I vaguely remember reading something, but I cannot remember off the top of my head where and what. And I'll do 2 things, and I'm quite happy to come back. One of, I'll try and have a dig around and see if I can find it. And secondly, let me explore this within SAP. As I said, I'm lucky that I work for a company that places a huge amount of importance on mental health well-being, and it would be good to see if we've actually got that evidence, because I think, to Roland's point, I would expect there to be a strong payback in investing in, I think it's not just investing in a well-being and mental health program, but actually just doing the right thing. As you said, as CSMs, and I've been there, so and largely we're probably still there, where customers call at all times potentially of the day and night if you let them, at weekends if you let them. Companies that you may work for may encourage you to do that. Now there's probably two ways. We either have to set boundaries better around what the expectation of the CSM role is, or we become slightly more creative around how we manage the time of our CSMs. And I've probably entertained more of a hybrid solution between the two of them, because there have been situations where member of my CSM team have had to support weekend activities for whatever it is. But it does mean that I'm very strict around giving them and ensuring they take time back. So if you have to work Saturday to Sunday to support a large upgrade or a large release, then I want to make sure that whether it's the Monday or Tuesday, or whether it's the Thursday, Friday at the end of that week, that you're actually getting time back. And that's not just the right thing to do in terms of the hours, but it's the right thing to do to make sure that you kind of recharge and refresh the batteries.
So speaking of kind of companies taking action, one of the things that I've seen several of these posts recently, and I'm curious to get your kind of thoughts on advice. I've seen a lot of CEOs, founders, company leaders offering their teams a mental health day or a mental health, part of a day. And they say, look, I'm going to shut down the office for maybe it's a day, maybe it's an afternoon, et cetera, and have a mental health day. And I think without proper, no, there is an element of just taking some time off and getting away from things. But I think there's also ways to think about it in terms of like doing that with kind of like maybe some guidance of, here's some things that we recommend you to do. You don't have to do these things, but here's one or two things that we recommend you do on your mental health day. Yeah. And I won't even call it a day off. It's a day specific to recharge and think through this. I mean, if you were in that boat, maybe you've done this, maybe you've seen other people do this. I'm kind of curious to get your advice on, if I'm a leader thinking, yeah, I should implement a mental health day. What do I do to make it more than just, another bank holiday or a day off to actually help improve this situation?
Yeah. So obviously we're, for those of you that may know, we're probably 2 weeks past, I think, World Mental Health Awareness Week. And during that week at SAP, we had 5 days full of a variety of activities that people can choose and get involved in. And there were all types of activities that we offered, everything from keynote speakers to remote mindfulness sessions, to yoga, if that's what your thing is. Now, again, for me, if you go and look online, mental health toolkit workplace, I printed one off actually. And this is, I think, a UK-based one, Mental Health Foundation, Managing Mental Health in the Workplace. And it's 25 pages of what you can do and ideas. And there's a plan in there as well, so you can actually plan this out yourself. There is lots of information and insights there that will help you be creative. But I know there are a lot of companies, again, through this kind of COVID period, that have been very conscious and cognizant of the fact that our employees are under huge pressure during this period for all the reasons we've spoken about and more. And I've seen companies give people off extra days. So here is 1 day during COVID. I think SAP in North America have recently done that. So there are things that you can do, and yes, guide people to things that they may choose and select. But I think ultimately you have to encourage people to take responsibility and know themselves well. And it may be that actually that thing is just spending time with your family, or actually maybe it's just turning off your phone for the day. I mean, for me, that is probably the most basic thing that we could all do to really detach ourselves from our daily work. Turn your mobile off, put it in a drawer and go out for a few hours. So I think, I think that's probably the advice. Lots out there. Be creative, but actually, at probably the very basic level, the very entry level, just disconnect from work for a few hours or an afternoon or a day.
Yeah, one thing that jumps out to me, just kind of among everything that you've said here, is, you know, we're all kind of on our own different journey. We're all on our own different path, and what works for you won't work for me and won't work for everybody else. And this is more an opportunity to think about, like, experiment with some things. You know, for some people it's mindfulness, yoga. Some people it's intense, you know, exercise. For some people it's just putting the mobile phone away. Some people it's going for a walk. Some people it's, you know, getting into some type of talk therapy, what have you. But it's, you know, being mindful and, you know, finding the right, you know, the right solution for you.
Yeah.
And
that's trial and error as well.
Yeah.
I've tried things. I'm like, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Glad I ticked it off the box. But I mean, the one the most simple one for me, and the one that I enjoy probably the most is my morning walk. And I get up early. I leave the family in bed before everyone else is up. I take my headphones with me. I listen to podcasts, and I go for a walk, and I'm out for about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. So I'm relaxed, I'm learning. That is my development piece as well, that stimulates me. And that is something that I've had in my routine for many months now.
Oh, very good. Well, this has been fantastic. I've learned a ton. I think, you know, everybody else will say the same. Really important topic, really, you know, good reminders, good advice. Any final pieces of advice, call to action, anything that you'd like to share with folks before we wrap up?
I think number one, look after yourself, because you are the most important person in your life. Now, whether you've got kids or not, whether you've got partners or not, you have to look after yourself for your number one priority, for your reasons. So that has to be the takeaway. I think the second one is the one that I set out to do with this, which is to try and make mental health something that is more acceptable to talk about generally. And if I've done that today by standing in front of all of you, and we've been able to publicize it through LinkedIn and Twitter, then great. Then that's my job kind of done. I think I'm not,
Sure.
Without sounding too selfish, for me, it's just about talking about it and accepting that it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, very good. Again, really appreciate you taking the time. For those of you who'd like to share this with your team or share this with anybody else, we'll be sending out the recording afterwards. And if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to myself, connect with, you know, Matt or myself on LinkedIn. Love to continue the dialogue. And thanks again. So we'll wrap it up there. And thanks again to Matt, and we'll all chat soon.